Yeah, when I sent the proposal, I sent that comparison of web application frameworks. But when I started preparing the talk, I kind of like started comparing, and then at the end, I found that it's better if I title it like Python and web. Okay, there's a good reasons for it, because we can go into the technical comparisons, and I will have a slide dedicated to the technical comparisons. But the different web frameworks, comparing them is not just about technical comparison. It's about ecosystem. It's about the community around the web frameworks and everything. So I have chosen some web frameworks which I am familiar with, and it's not just the web frameworks right now. So Python and web, which is moving very fast, is not just frameworks actually. It has servers, it has the other JavaScript frameworks and everything. It's like a stack now, and Python is used in different portions of the stack. There is Twisted, there's Tornado, there is like other deployment frameworks like Fabric, and web companies seems to be using all of them in their Python stack when they are developing a web application. So we will look at different pieces of the Python software which the companies are using, and then see what is their state in the current world, how the technology is evolving, like what kind of approaches they are making, and then what's the strategy, and then how's the bug fixes and features coming up in different frameworks, and then what is their idea towards Python 3. I specifically am interested in Python 3 because I work in that, and look at their long-term plan. And not only that, your language and the framework also depends a lot on the adoption. So if a big company or something has adopted a particular framework, it gets a mind share for the community, and it's very easy for the framework and the developers to stay motivated and contribute and bring in new features to that. So we will see what different frameworks have been adopted by well-known names, so that we'll look at it. That's my talk. It's Python and web. Something about me: I'm Senthil Kumaran. I'm a Python code developer. I work as an engineer at Lucasfilm. That's a QR code which I just was playing around, where it will lead you to my homepage, whatever. So why is this talk? Singapore has a web dev mindshare. Okay, once I came to Singapore, I came to realize that if I were talking in Bangalore, and if I were talking to my friends in Bangalore, I could have talked about Python language itself, sometimes talked a lot about algorithms and some specific features in the language and stuff like that, because I have friends there who work on different areas. When I came to Singapore and I started realizing what kind of a community there is, and then what kind of engineering folks are here, I see a lot are into web development, are into iPhone and apps development, and they have a lot of like a startup mindshare. So they don't see it as a technology. They see the tools to enable them to build their company, to build their product. The point is driven towards like you use the right tool for the job, and then start your company, and then start your web application and get going. That's how the thought is actually. And whenever you talk to folks, the conversation itself seems towards like using the correct tool and then getting the job done quickly. But I realized that it's skewed towards specific technologies. Like any web development you talk about, they talk about Ruby on Rails, and they talk about Django, they talk about like specific jQuery, and they talk about specific databases. And right now they are all talking about big data, which is nothing but the databases actually. So so I feel that it's skewed towards specific technologies, and a wider understanding may help us more. That's my motivation, like to just do a general survey of all the areas, and then get a feel and how things are in other world, so that even people in Singapore, if they attend the talk or see the talk online, they can get an understanding of how the different technologies are being used by other companies, and may form informed decisions, something like that. Technically, it's not a strict comparison. All frameworks share some commonality above a certain level. It's all MVC. It's all about putting the stack in the correct places. They all underlyingly use the same technologies. When I say it's not a comparison, there is a specific talk given by Richard, who's sitting here, called what did you title it? Shootout? Web
Micro Frameworks Battle.
Yeah, Web Micro Frameworks Battle. And if you look at it, it's very specific as a comparison. Like he gave points to different frameworks, and he chose everything which is like a low level, which are completely different. After some high level, if you look Django and other stuff, they all seem to merge together Only difference seems to be the philosophy in which they have adopted and went forward with it. Like philosophically, Django and Pyramid are different, okay? But in terms of style and in terms of doing stuff and then in terms of building web applications, you'll almost end up in the same way. Because you have chosen different philosophy, you'll definitely end up in doing something different, but it still shares the same architectural designs, and then the way you approach building a web application will be same if you use high-level frameworks. So that's the point. We will look at the basic differences from the community aspects, and we will also look at the state of affairs in the world. If you just go to this web page, which I'll show in the next chart, you will see that the comparison is like they have chosen all the projects, the Python web application framework on the left-hand side, and the features which we are looking for. And you could see that almost all share the features which we will want in web apps. The most interesting thing is this thing, okay, ORM, the object relational mapper, which we will choose. The ORM could be like some frameworks don't tie themselves to ORM. The one which ties itself to ORM is the Django, okay, which is Django ORM. Of course, people say that you can not tie yourself and do it, but by design it ties itself to ORM, and that specifically makes you constrained to use that ORM. But things like Pyramid, Pylons, they are ORM agnostic. And if you already have your database in Oracle or in MySQL or in PostgreSQL, you need not worry about it, because you can write a layer on top of it and then have an ORM interface and then use the different frameworks to it. Okay, so those are the advantages in using some ORM agnostic frameworks. Apart from that, I don't see any other. The philosophical differences, of course, are provided. Sometimes Django, when it's like database migration, which is provided by South, seems to be specific in terms of people find it easy to migrate the database using this frameworks called South for Django. In terms of Pyramid and Pylons, it depends on ORM again, what kind of a database which you are using and how to migrate it, and its specific generations. Templating engine, almost all can choose different kinds of templates, and it's the choice which matters, and all the different frameworks are kind of like, they work well and they have a recommended templating engine, but they try to stay away from, they give you a choice what kind of templating engine which you want to use. Specifically the Pylons and Pyramid world, they allow you to choose that. Django has its own templating language too. Django as such is like more geared towards the self-contained web application framework, which you can like get into the world and then use the specific technologies which they seem to be using, and you'll get used to it. And the good part of Django is, because everyone is trying to do in the same way, you have pluggable components. So you don't have to worry about some different component which is not present in Django. And Django has this huge community of different components in a pluggable manner, which you can use in your web application and then get going. Pylons and Pyramids, you don't have pluggable components, but you have libraries which are shared by Pylons and Pyramids. So you can have a caching library from Beaker, you can have a OAuth authentication library which you want, and then you can choose those libraries into your web application and then develop the web application. So a ready-made pluggable component which you can fit in, like you use a JavaScript framework, may not be available, but you have a good library, and as an experienced developer, you feel more flexible using a library and building the component fitting into your application than plugging in a component from outside. So what shall we look for in this presentation? Okay, that was a general overview, but what shall we look for is we'll look for technology, how it has progressed in these frameworks, what's the ecosystem like in these frameworks, and then what's the community like. Okay. Something about Python 3, which I just noted yesterday. Okay, it's Randall, who's a creator of Node.js, says that, why does rage sweep through me every time I see some code that depends on Python 3? Yeah, it's funny, actually. I mean, it's not it's not funny, because, well, you should look at Pyramid, Django, Twisted, Tornado, SciPy, NumPy, and Python 3 standard library, because all of them have support for Python 3 these days. Okay, Django is moving. Pyramid has. Okay, Django doesn't have, but it's going. But Tornado is running on Python 3, and Twisted 3 has a branch on Python 3 which is working. SciPy and NumPy. But the point is, it's very advanced and it's not used in the real world deployment yet. But that doesn't mean that it's not there. So the whole ecosystem seems to have some focus in terms of getting to adopt the latest features available in the language in Python 3 and the standard library. So that is one of the goals which all the frameworks are looking at. And thinking of web, if you think all these things will you think about? If you think about Python and web, like all the different frameworks, you will think about micro frameworks, you will think about you'll think about like the servers, any kind of server, HTTP server, specifically Tornado, and you will think about ORMs and everything. Okay, specifically for Django. Django's reusability and pluggability, like I said in the first slide, that's still a big win for it. Okay, and admin interface is still a big win. Like the automatic admin interface which you create when you're using Django, that's one of the reasons which many people, when you are writing your small web app and when you're writing your web app for your purposes, people tend to choose that because Django provides this automatic admin interface which is generated by its model. So that is one of the key points in Django. The current stable version is like 1.4, and companies which seem to be using Django like Pinterest, Instagram, Disqus, and then PBS have had a huge say in terms of adoption in Django. Specifically, like I looked at Pinterest and what are they using. They said that like Pinterest heavily modified Django at the application layer, and they use Tornado, which is again a Python project, and Node.js specifically in web servers for the web server layer. And as with any modern web app, they kind of have their stack with Memcached and Redis for caching and RabbitMQ for message queue and stuff like that. Okay, it's an example of a modern web app. That's it. Okay, the modern web app below the JavaScript layer, this is what it consists of. You have very good new web server like Tornado. You can use anything else too, like Nginx. And then on top of it, you have like you have a web application which is they are using Django, and then you have all the other services for doing tasks in an asynchronous manner. So that's, and then Instagram too, which was in news recently, seems to be like using Django, because one of the reasons is Django's pluggability with Whiskey server. They use the Unicorn as a server. Okay, pretty cool. I had known about Unicorn as a server, but I had not known that your world famous deployment is using it as the real production server. And they seem to be using Python, the Fabric application, which is used for deploying multiple machines at the same time, and parallel executing of the Django for deploying the Django. They're using Fabric, using PostgreSQL, which is like a standard database for it. Push notifications, which you get it in your phone. They use a twisted service called PyAPNS for that. And then metrics using the Munin. I don't know about it, but error logging is Django Sentry is a Django app for giving Python exceptions in a much greater way. Looks like they are also completely focused towards Django, and the stack which they are using is like a Django stack with Unicorn as the Whiskey server, and Django talks to the Whiskey server using the Whiskey interface. So having the Whiskey interface has helped to choose the particular servers which a particular company wants to use. And Django community is huge and vibrant. Okay, that's the one best part of the Django community. And if you are feeling that someone is talking about Django a lot, I personally think that it's because of the community. Okay, it's huge and vibrant, and they have a bi-yearly DjangoCon, and one was in progress like 2 days ago. So there was something going on there. And that's huge positive plus point for Django, because when you have a huge community backing your open source projects, getting an I wouldn't say approval, but getting a nod or getting an agreement from anyone that okay, it could be a good framework to try is easy, because it's what the marketing is all about, right? So teaching people in terms of okay, we are effective, we are there to support you, and something like that. So that's a positive for Django, and companies are using it there. Python 3, the latest of Django, which is it's going towards Python 2.6. Okay, the way they have adopted is they will go for Python 2.6, and then they will go towards Python 2.7, which is much easier to migrate to Python 2.3. Okay, that's the way. At the moment, they still are into Python. They say that the oldest Python release which is supported is like Python 2.5. After going to Python 2.7, use a compatibility layer on the migration path, which can deploy the Djangos to the next version of Python, which is faster, and that's why people are going. Fear is the size of the community and not the technical details. Why is someone not moving to next versions of Python? It's the size of the community. Like, it's huge, it's adopted, it's maintained, and a lot of people are involved there. So you don't want to go into a backwards incompatible mode. That's not the technical details, but in the further down slides, we will see that some of the frameworks have already moved it. Okay, even though they are huge, they have moved in. So it's the communities The Django communities thought that being a huge community, let's take a much slower stage and make the movement at a much slower pace, which is good actually. That's the reference. So we looked at Django. Okay. After talking about Django, when someone goes into much details of web apps, they talk about Pyramid. And the T-shirt which I'm wearing is like a Pyramid logo T-shirt. It's good. It was inspired by Zope, Pylons, and Django. Okay, the framework itself took its roots from Zope and Pylons, and Zope is one of the earliest and oldest web application framework in Python. And all the good technologies are present in Zope. Okay, except that it doesn't have that kind of a Django's mind share with the young people or like beginner programmers. That's there. Its Pyramid is like a minimalist framework, reuses existing components from the community. It chose the approach in terms like they will use existing components because everything will talk WSGI. So they adopted that layer that let the existing component writers deal it in their way. They are good in doing what they do for smallest tasks, and then we will be able to plug them all together, glue them all together, and make a minimalistic web framework which is easy to use. And they have this neat philosophy of pay only what you eat. Like you don't want to bring in more layers into your framework when you're not using it. So that's it. You can choose to use whatever you are going to use. And supports SQL and NoSQL because it's just gluing together of different components. If you choose correct components, you'll be able to use your not only SQL kind of databases in your web applications. You are not tied to a particular database. And what's new? This is interesting. I came to know Python 1.3 has Python 3 support, okay, which is very interesting. And the best part is they are able to have both Python 2 and Python 3 as a compatible layer in a single software which runs both. Okay, I'm surprised at like I would like to dwell more into that. They have made some technical choices for that. For example, they have removed number of components which were purely dependent on Python 2 and they worked with Python 2 and moved to some new component. Like for example, the current server which was called Paster is now called Waitress or something like. So because they had to make the changes which were compatible with both layers. And yes, it involves the cost of your trading yourself to move further. And I guess they are able to do it because the companies which are using those kinds of frameworks are already dealing with the libraries. So they are into getting into the code all the time. So they just inform the people that you are going to change it to the new library and then they should be ready to adopt it. Okay, that's the good thing about the Pyramid world. And look at the companies which seem to be using Pyramid, like Dropbox, Reddit, Dig. Okay, pretty big names in equal in comparison for that. Dropbox we may not worry about because it's not a web app. Web app is just it's a component in web, but Dropbox is like the main service focuses in the back end where they do the sync and keep your service about. But Reddit is a web app. Okay, Reddit and in Python, PyCon 2011 or 2010, I guess one of the founders of Reddit came to PyCon and he has a keynote talk on why he chose to move from Lisp to Python. Yeah, and because they wanted the batteries included philosophy. Okay, the Python and the Python frameworks had these batteries included philosophy. It's not about the language as such. Okay, it's about the ecosystem. Like it's about if you want to write your new authentication scheme to be working on your web application. The guys who are doing Reddit were not writing software; they were building a company. So they focused on using software which was readily available and easily usable for them, and then they moved to Python for that. Yeah, there's a huge Reddit thread itself on that, and then it's kind of like self-recursive, right? Reddit moved from Lisp to Python, and there's a Reddit thread on why that Reddit moved from Lisp to Python. Okay. You have the source code available on GitHub. That's a community aspect of it. You have check-ins happening everywhere. It's Pylons right now. Pylons is a part of a Pyramid project too. So the whole site is a web app, and framework they use is a big deal. So that's a good example of how Pylons Pyramid is used in a big scale site. Dropbox, as I said previously, the framework, the web application is just a part. We don't see a lot of interaction as a web app. But they, as a Python company, use a lot in Python in terms of backend and then desktop client and web control logic and API back everything. It runs on a single code base which is Python. This is surprising for me. Okay, be it Mac or be it Windows or be it Linux, it's a single code base which is running Python, and the company as such is able to deploy the different versions in different product lines using just Python. And Pylons and Pyramid as their web application. When you are using Dropbox in your web interface, you are using your Pylons web app, which is okay, fine. I mean, even though they are not known for a web application, but known for the client, actually. Community as such, the whole community of Pylons, the source code and the bug tracker, everything has moved to GitHub with 66 repos and 38 members. 66 repos are nothing but the different libraries which Pylons is using, like Paster, like Beaker, and Web Object, Web Helpers, and all the libraries which Pylons uses it to build their Pylons project. Lots of activities usually happen, and they don't have this mindshare like specific conference and stuff like that. But if you go to US PyCon, you will find that a lot of Pylons developers come there and sprint on Pylons to improve Pylons and Pyramid to further effort. But the point here is, even in Firefox, Mozilla, because a lot of developers are working in Mozilla, I'm sure that Mozilla might have a lot of applications built on Pyramid. Okay, and we all know that Mozilla has certain standards, like certain outlook towards maintaining the standards in the web. And the same philosophy is shared, I feel, that by the Pyramid guys also. They look for standards, they look for working with the standards, and then they kind of like work in a specific way where everything can be fit together. There is a drawback also in the same philosophy. Some people claim that, just like Zope did, okay, try to be everything to everyone, which is difficult. And that's where the other micro frameworks are winning, where they want to be specific to some specific needs. Okay, so there are both sides of the coin here, trying to be everything to everyone versus trying to adhere to the standards and build a web application which can be used for your needs. That's that. And Pyramid and Python 3, yes. If you go to the Pyramid page, you will see this beautiful logo which says that it's supported. Okay, this is one of the lesser known frameworks, but it's an excellent framework. Okay, the reason is it includes batteries itself. Okay, Python comes with batteries included philosophy, and now you have a web framework which contains the batteries also. Like, it has the Django's default templating. It has an automatic ticket creating system. Like, if you write your web application and then you go about, if there's a mistake and it crashes, it automatically creates a ticket and then creates it for you for tracking. Automatic admin interface, yeah. Default templating is interesting. If you forget, you can code your application in Python itself and then use the default templating without writing HTML. It will choose to display your business logic in a default template, very bare bones template. Now that you can understand your business logic in your web application, then go about writing the HTML to choose your style for that. Okay. First thing when you write your web application is you design your databases and then you write your business logic using controllers. Till that, this is beautiful. Okay, this is excellent actually. It's very good for learning, and that's what I guess the Massimo Di Piero, who's the author of Web2Py, was focused on. And some of them are like really good technologies. They go about creating new technologies specific for the needs, and it's like very high level and easy to use. And for that reason, they won the InfoWorld's Tech Award 2012. Like, there was a news there. Look at the last sentence. Web2Py is as painless as it gets, which is good actually. Which is like you have everything in a box, which you can do it. Okay. Lot of sites are powered by Web2Py. You find the apac.pycon.org. It's a Web2Py site. Community, it's again it's maintained in GitHub, and there's no scope in Python 3, but they're ready to move. But the whole focus of that is provide everything in a box, okay, which is good. Which is like you develop your web app and you want to be serving your web app soon. You want complete control. You are teaching your students the web application development, and you want to stay simple. You want to remove the dependencies. You don't want to meddle with what editor they are going to use, because there's a web IDE provided by Web2Py also. So these are the factors which are adopting Web2Py, and a lot of smaller sites and medium business sites are using it. I didn't find big companies which are using it. So that's why I think that Web2Py is not having the share as it well-deserved should. Okay, these were the top layers of the web frameworks. Okay, like the ones which interact with the users and then have the request. If you go down in the web and in the stack of technologies which anyone needs to use, you will go about Twisted. Okay. Twisted, which is like a event-driven networking engine, supports many protocols, and you can write custom protocols too. Okay. And my idea about when you will use Twisted and Tornado or something like it is, you have to identify your problem where the Twisted will be suitable, and that's the kind of a difficult part. Like for what kind of an event handling system, what kind of a asynchronous request handling system you want to build, where Twisted needs to be used. And once you identify that either in a web app or in your desktop application, in any application, then you will go about writing your software using Twisted. In web, it can be used as an abstraction layer. It's interface to the web servers, and interface to a database as proxy connection manager to the pool. In my job in Lucasfilm, I've seen it being used as a database proxy and as a connection manager to the pool. Like all the information is present in the databases, and the databases are replicated across in different sites. So you need a connection layer which talks to the correct database and get the information out of it. So you don't want to do a query always to the database. So the stack is written in such a way that the custom ORM is written. It talks to the Twisted connection manager, and then the connection manager maintains which database to use for getting the connection. And if you abstract it further, it's nothing but a load balancer between the databases. Lots of companies use it both internally and externally. Lucasfilm, Singapore and US uses it. Ubuntu uses it for a lot of their file sharing services, Ubuntu One and stuff like that. TweetDeck, it's again a web app which is like interfacing different web applications, seems to be using it for their purposes. What's new in Twisted? Twisted recently released their new framework to 12.0, and one of the primary things which I see is like they have a primary support for IPv6 on the server side. So you can write your Twisted Internet Server, which is your server application running on your computer, and can natively have an IPv6 addresses assigned to it. It has had numerous bug fixes. It's again a very active community, very self-contained community, and a lot of activities going on. Bug fixes do get responded back. Bugs they responded back quickly, and bugs get closed pretty quickly too. That's pretty interesting in terms of Twisted communities are motivated and they fix it. Active community at twistedmatrix.com. And Antoine Pitro wrote the Python 3 support for Twisted in a branch, and there is a slow in adoption to it, but they are working. So I saw that the Summer of Code student is working to integrate that into Twisted's mainstream, which is like, so we will soon see perhaps a Twisted with a Python 3 support. And the competitor for Twisted right now is Tornado, which is a new addition to the Python web ecosystem. Okay, it's a server again. It's in the same league as Twisted, Unicorn, and stuff like that. But the best part is it has the mindshare because it's used by friend feed, and then it was released by Facebook. So it's available from the GitHub's Facebook page, and I found that this excellent web app called Hipmunk, okay, which I have been using for a while, pretty good actually. It's by the same guy who developed Reddit, and right now is developing Hipmunk, is using Tornado as their web application. But when I'm starting using web apps these days, I realize more in terms of their logic which they are trying to see, how they look at their business values which they are going to bring the customers, and then the front end and the JavaScript layers which they are using, which seems to be playing a very important role. In terms like web applications, I feel that has gone more towards the competition towards the design. Like how you want to design it in such a way that your users will get using it, and then have you'll feel that they like it. Okay, that's what the web application is designed to it. In terms of technology, yes, they have evaluated and they seem to be using Tornado. Quora seems to be using Tornado, and one of the differences between Twisted and Tornado is Tornado wasn't released for Windows initially. Twisted is both on Windows and Linux, and Twisted you can write your own servers, any custom servers. If you want to write a BitTorrent like protocol running on different machines and then talking to each other, if you want to write a connection manager talking to the databases, you can do it in Twisted, but not in Tornado. Tornado is like a web application. It's like a HTTP server. It's a HTTP server which is scattered towards your web application, and that's what it was designed for, and that's where it is seeing its primary usage in. And surprisingly, Twisted has a support for all the different Pythons and Python 3.2, which is good, actually. Sorry, Tornado, I said. Tornado has a support for all the different Python versions. And in terms of client sides, which is happening in the web, the library called Requests, which is making a good progress and then has gained a great mind share. It has a lot of new features, and then it's making rapid adoption in many frameworks. There is also Python standard library with URLib and others have made improvements in Python 3 actually, because Python 3 fixes are in progress. And there are also plenty of other libraries in client world which every framework needs to share, and they're using it pretty well. On the whole, the Python ecosystem is it's very vibrant and it's moving at a much faster pace than any of the other ecosystems which I can think of. Like there's a lot of technologies involved. Despite the differences, there's a commonality in their approaches. Okay, like MVC architecture, WSGI support, which is very important. Once the Python came out with pip 3.3.3.3 and pip the 4.3s together, a lot of libraries, client side and the server side, are able to adopt that and then move faster and work well together. And they are playing well with other libraries. Because and Python in web is easy to do because Python languages itself is easy to do. Yes, not sure if anyone's taking the courses called like Udacity, where one of the founders of Reddit and Hipmunk developers, he is teaching web application development, and he's choosing Python to teach web application development, and he's showing how it is. The reason it is because you can teach the concept of web application and use Python, which is easy to use, and you have all the technologies available to you which you can choose to use your web app from. That's pretty much from my talk, and I hope I gave you a general overview of what's the state of affairs. Yes, Richard.
So which one's the best one?
That's a tricky question. Yeah, there is no answer to which one is the best one. Yeah.
Have you done any web application in development in Twisted?
No, I know that it can be done.
Proxying.
Yes, it's just proxying. The Twisted web, twisted.web, you can write your Nevow, you mean to say, Nevow. Nevow is the framework which is done in Twisted. But Twisted seems to be focused more towards server development rather than web. Yes.
Are you aware of a framework which is the most like PHP in the sense that it's just embedded Python without all the other stuff, no MVC, no URL routing?
So if you use mod Python and its PSP handler, yes, so mod Python with PSP handler does support very PHP-like web development. Not actually. So mod Python itself is not being maintained. So mod WSGI is the way where every framework is going. So
does it have something like PSP?
yes, not mod WSGI, not mod WSGI. Okay, mod Python, yes, but still a lot of sites are using it because mod Python was very early framework, and then
We use Spice, which is something like that, but it hasn't been there in 2 years.
okay.
So I was wondering if there was something new.
You can look at mod Python, but you can find a good migration path. But I guess in the Python world, people are advised to move to mod WSGI then mod Python.
Yeah.
But starting with mod Python is not a bad thing.
Just a quick question. In your slides, you use pyramid and pylons almost interchangeably. Could you maybe explain that a little bit? The relationship?
It could be my mistake actually. I didn't use pyramid and pylons interchangeably. My first focus was on oops. Okay, the first focus was completely on Django, all these focus, and then, oh sorry, you meant Pylons and Pyramid.
Yeah, pylons and
Oh yeah, Pylons was the one which started their approach of the lightweight framework with all the glues together. And then they realized that repos.bfg was another framework which is adopting the same approach, done by some other folks. Okay, then they saw that it's good idea to merge both the frameworks together and then form this project called Pyramid. So whatever directions and the future ideas and vision which Pylons project had for the development, they shared with repos.bfg and said that we will have a common framework called Pyramid and then go forward with it. So the companies which started using Pylons way before, like way before 2011, they may be using Pylons. Okay, and when they now start using Pylons framework, they will term themselves as Pyramid because it includes some other framework too. Exactly, got it? Yes, Richard.
Yeah, on the PHP.
Here.
On the PHP, I think
So,
the PHP thing, Aspen.io. It's a strange little micro framework that's basically Python files and templating all kind of smooshed together. It's kind of neat, but it might be what you're looking for.
ASPEN, right?
Yep.
okay,
Aspen.io.
let's go. I'll look at it.
How do you compare the performance of NGINX versus terminal? They are supposed to be compared?
Yes, they are both written to solve the C10K problem. Nginx was specifically written to solve the C10K problem. Tornado seems to be written with solving the problem which is basically the high performance web server, but it specifically was written for front feed. So they are high performance servers specifically written with that in mind, but Nginx specifically was theoretically was written to solve that. So if you go for some theoretical benchmarks, you will find that Nginx may win, but benchmarks are not always something which you have.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank
you very much, Senthil.
Thanks. Thank you.